The following podcast contains discussions of child neglect, animal abuse, plus casual and not so casual racism. Also, spoilers. Lots of spoilers. Ready? Let's dig in. You know when you're a kid and all you have to worry about is impressing your crush with cartwheels? Or running away to join the circus even though you really hate clowns? Or dangling a cat from a ceiling so that it can snatch your teacher's wig right off his head? Or accidentally witnessing a murder while burying a cat at midnight in a creepy old graveyard to cure your warts? Wait, what? Is that not a universal childhood experience? Oh, it's not? Ooh, my bad. Hi, I'm Gabby, and this is Digestibles, a podcast about all the books you were told to read but probably didn't. And today, we are going to talk about an irresistible, irrepressible 12-year-old named Tom Sawyer. Published in 1876, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer is one of the masterpieces of American literature, loosely based on the author Mark Twain's childhood. The book combines humor and social commentary in a way that's just plain fun. Also, it's a bit racist. But you kinda expect that from novels written before the American Civil War era. In fact, both Tom Sawyer and its sequel Huckleberry Finn were banned from some children's libraries because of its inappropriate language, not to mention their problematic portrayal of Native Americans and African Americans respectively. But that's a problem for later. Right now, let me introduce you to our boy Tom. He is trouble with a capital T. We know this from the first scene where his aunt, Polly, is looking for him because she just knows he's doing something he's not supposed to be doing. And what do you know? She catches him red-handed, red-mouthed, covered in the jam. She's about to give him a whipping when Tom shouts, "Look behind you!" She falls for it and Tom escapes, climbing over the fence and disappearing. Aunt Polly laughs it off. She's used to his mischief. Later, Tom returns in time to help Jim, their young black house, slave, with the chores. Well, if by help you mean talk about all his adventures while Jim does most of the work. During dinner, Aunt Polly notices that Tom's hair is damp, so she tries to get him to admit that he skipped school to go swimming. Tom explains that it was too hot that afternoon, so he poured water over his head. He shows Aunt Polly that his collar is still attached, meaning he didn't take his shirt off. Aunt Polly is relieved and is going to let it go when Sid, Tom's younger brother, goes, "Wait, the thread in the collar is black. Wasn't it white?" Tom quickly makes his escape again while promising revenge on Sid for tattling on him. But barely 2 minutes pass before he forgets all about it. He's bumped into a strange boy. Strange because he's well-dressed and that's enough for Tom to feel hate at first sight. Before you know it, they're in a Mexican standoff, throwing insults and later, fists. Tom wins over his nemesis, sitting on him until he cries. When Tom lets up, the boy throws a stone at his back, so Tom chases him all the way home. He may not know the boy's name, but he knows where he lives and he's watching. Tom goes home and tries to sneak in through a window, but Aunt Polly catches him, and as soon as she sees his dirty clothes, she punishes him by giving him an extra chore.
Saturday morning has come, and all the summer world was bright and fresh and brimming with life. There was a song in every heart, and if the heart was young, the music issued at the lips. There was a cheer in every face and a spring in every step. The locust trees were in bloom, and the fragrance of the blossoms filled the air. Cardiff Hill, beyond the village and above it, was green with vegetation, and it lay just far enough away to seem a delectable land. Dreamy, reposeful, and inviting. Tom appeared on the sidewalk with a bucket of whitewash and a long-handled brush. He surveyed the fence, and all gladness left him, and a deep melancholy settled down upon his spirit. 30 yards of board fence 9 feet high, Life to him seemed hollow, and existence but a burden.
Tom's punishment is to whitewash a fence. That means exactly what you think it means. He has to paint a fence white. Tom makes one swipe and then another, but he's already bored and the yet unpainted areas of the fence look vast. Jim passes by on his way to the pump to fetch water. Tom tries to switch duties by bribing Jim with a special kind of marble. Jim is about to agree when Aunt Polly puts an end to it. Tom soon has another scheme, and another mark. His buddy Ben is skipping and singing along the way because he's got no chores to do on a Saturday. No worries, Tom's about to ruin that. He makes a big deal out of whitewashing the fence, putting on the biggest smile on his face. Ben gets curious and stops to tease Tom about his having to work. Tom replies, "What are you calling work? It's work to some people, but not to me." He continues to paint like it's the best thing ever. So now, Ben wants in on the fun too. But no, Tom says. Aunt Polly won't allow just anyone to paint her fence. Ben really wants to try out this whitewashing thing, so he offers Tom his apple in exchange. Tom reluctantly takes the apple, makes a sad face, and hands Ben the brush. Then, he sits down and looks out for his next victim. Friend. His next friend, yeah. It's not long before he's scamming all of his friends. As soon as one boy is tired, there's another to take his place. And by the end of the day, Tom is the proud owner of a pile of, stuff. 12 marbles, random bits of glass, a key that won't open anything, a doorknob, a one-eyed kitten, a dead rat, and, well, you know what they say. One boy's trash is another boy's treasure. Whatever you think, Tom is now a wealthy boy. He's also discovered a very useful lesson. The only way to make someone want something is to make that something hard to get. Aunt Polly can't believe her eyes when Tom shows her the finished fence. She gives him an apple as a prize. Tom celebrates first by throwing dirt at his brother Sid. Then he joins his friends in the town square and they spend the rest of the day playing battles. On the way home, he sees a blonde, blue-eyed girl in a garden and falls in love immediately. Tom does what any boy would do and shows off by doing acrobatics outside her gate. The girl throws him a flower before going back into the house. He picks it up between his toes and hangs around, but she never goes back out again. The next day is Sunday, the day of rest. Yeah, just kidding. There's no rest for the wicked. Or at least very naughty boys. Aunt Polly and Tom's cousin Mary are trying to teach the boys their Bible verses before Sunday school, and Tom cannot memorize anything. But, remember that pile of treasures he got from his whitewashing scam? He starts swapping them for tickets. See, in their Sunday school, for every Bible verse you can recite properly, you get a ticket. Like in an arcade, only, less fun, more Jesus. When you get enough tickets, you win a Bible. It takes around 2,000 verses, and even Mary, who's a good student, collected tickets for 2 years before she got her Bible. In the middle of class, the girl in the garden arrives. Her father is introduced, and he's a judge. Ooh. Tom knows the perfect way to get her attention. He stands up and shows the teacher all his ill-begotten tickets. The teacher's sure that Tom hasn't recited enough verses, but he has no choice but to give Tom the Bible. The judge, Thatcher, congratulates Tom and asks him who are the first 2 disciples appointed by Jesus. Panicking, Tom blurts out the first 2 names he can think of. David and Goliath! We end the scene abruptly, sparing Tom from any further embarrassment. Okay, so I'm warning you now that I'm just gonna skip some of Tom's minor adventures because there are a lot of them and ain't nobody got time for all of that. Tom's on his way to school when we meet Huckleberry Finn. He's the son of the town drunkard and nobody gives an F about him, so he's always dirty and dressed in rags, practically homeless and sleeping wherever. Nobody tells him not to swear or fight or go to bed early or forces him to go to school. So yeah, he's basically Tom's idol. Huck is holding a dead cat. Tom asks him what it's for and Huck says it can cure warts. Tom says he has a better cure. Spunk water. Let me check my notes. Okay, spunk water is the water you find inside the hollow of a rotting tree stump. Good to know. Anyway, Huck's like, no. He's heard it from good authority, aka the local witch, that the best cure for warts is to bury a dead cat near the grave of a recently buried wicked person. At midnight, when the devil comes to take the bad guy to hell, the dead cat will follow his corpse and then all the warts will follow the cat. Sure, sounds legit. Luckily, a bad dude just got buried and Huck happens to have a dead cat. So does Tom want to join him tonight to test out his theory? And Tom's like, I'm game for that. Tom's late for class now and as punishment, he's forced to sit with the girls. It's a welcome one cause he sits right next to the girl he likes. After a bit of flirting, he finds out her name is Becky and she kinda likes him too. But when he writes I love you on the slate, Becky's like, yo, dude, take a chill pill and hits his hand. At recess, Tom goes over to Becky. He tells her he loves her and they should totally get engaged. After a bit of courting, he gets Becky to tell him she loves him too. She even agrees to a kiss. But Tom lets it slip that he's kissed and been engaged to someone else before. A certain Amy Lawrence. So young and already a playa. Becky does not take this well and starts to cry. I mean, I don't think I would either. Tom tries to comfort her and offers his most prized possession, a sort of brass knob, to make her happy. Becky's like, what am I supposed to do with that? And knocks it to the ground. Tom can't deal with her emotions and does what most emotionally incapable boys do. He runs away.
The boy's soul was steeped in melancholy. His feelings were in happy accord with his surroundings. It seemed to him that life was but a trouble at best. If he only had a clean Sunday school record, he could be willing to go and be done with it all. Now as to this girl, what had he done? Nothing. He had meant the best in the world and been treated like a dog, like a very dog. She would be sorry someday, maybe when it was too late. If he could only die temporarily. But the elastic heart of youth cannot be compressed into one constrained shape long at a time. Tom presently began to drift insensibly back into the concerns of this life again. What if he turned his back now and disappeared mysteriously? What if he went away, ever so far away, into unknown countries beyond the seas, and never came back anymore? How would she feel then? He would be a soldier and return after long years, all war-worn and illustrious. No, better still, he would join the Indians and hunt buffaloes and go on the warpath in the mountain ranges and the trackless Great Plains of the far west. But no, there was something gaudier even than this. He would be a pirate! That was it! Now his future lay plain before him, and glowing with unimaginable splendor.
His BFF Joe skips class 2 and finds Tom. They spend the rest of the day playing Robin Hood. And after, the boys decide that they would rather be outlaws than president of the United States. Well, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's that much of a difference nowadays. That night, Tom sneaks out to join Huck and his dead cat. They make their way to the graveyard, and like all graveyards, it's a spooky place with too tall grass, sunken graves, and instead of nice tombstones, there are worm-eaten wood boards with faded writing. They stand over the fresh grave of the bad dude and Tom begins to have second thoughts. He and Huck barely debate about what to do before the devil arrives. And by the devil, I mean 3 totally normal people out for a totally normal walk in the graveyard in the middle of the night. Not. It's the local Dr. Robinson with 2 shady fellows from the village, a drunkard, Muff Potter, and Injun Joe. And, okay, to interrupt a bit because, again, Tom Sawyer was written when race relations in America wasn't exactly politically correct. You'll see a lot of insensitive language like the use of the N-word and the term Indian, which is a slur against Native Americans. There's a debate about changing it to the more generic Indian and whether that's helpful or harmful. But I'm also not fully Native American. I mean, my dad is, well, I won't explain it. Let's just say I'm like 1/16th something, so that doesn't count. Therefore, my opinion doesn't really matter. I'll refer to him as written, but, FYI, don't use it outside discussions of this book. Oh, and, name aside, even the way the character is written plays to a lot of racist Native American stereotypes. Dude's evil and violent and one note just 'cause, I don't know. Shrug emoji. Anyway, back to the story. The not-so-good doctor orders the men to dig up the grave. I presume for questionable medical reasons. As soon as they finish, Potter demands more money and he and the doctor fight. While they're distracted, Joe picks up Potter's knife. When the doctor hits Potter in the head, Joe takes his chance and stabs the doctor in his chest. Frightened, Tom and Huck slip away unnoticed. Joe puts the knife in Potter's hands. Potter regains consciousness and asks him what happened. Joe tells him he killed the doctor. Potter is too drunk to remember and believes him. Joe promises he'll keep his mouth shut about the crime. Meanwhile, the two boys go into an empty building to hide. They can't go to the police about what they've seen because they're scared Joe might escape and kill them. They take a blood oath to stay quiet, made with actual blood because that's always important. News of the murder spreads throughout town. A bloody knife was found near the doctor's body and someone recognizes it as Muff Potter's. The townspeople gather in the graveyard. Tom finds Huck in the crowd. And not far away is Injun Joe. Muff Potter shows up and the sheriff moves to arrest him. Potter protests his innocence and asks his buddy Joe to back him up. Joe lies like the villain he is and says Potter is the murderer. Tom and Huck know he's lying and are waiting for him to get struck by lightning since they've been taught that that's what happens when someone lies. The big G-man's a little bit slow to react though. Joe repeats his lies and still no lightning. Potter is taken away to jail. Tom feels guilty about his silence and smuggles in small gifts to his cell. Becky stops coming to school and this makes Tom more depressed. Aunt Polly treats him with all sorts of remedies to try and jolt him out of whatever funk he's suffering from. Some of them aren't exactly child-friendly. The worst is something called the painkiller, which is described as fire in liquid form. And it works. Actually, no, it actually doesn't work. Tom's just pretending so Aunt Polly will stop making him drink it. He usually pours it out into a crack on the floor, but one day, he feeds it to the family cat. Immediately, the cat starts acting real hyper, tearing into everything in the house like it's on crack. Aunt Polly realizes what Tom's been doing and figures that what's bad for the cat is probably bad for the boy as well. Yeah, don't do drugs, kids. But good news, Becky is back in school. Tom starts showing off again, but Becky's all, "That don't impress me much." It's the last straw. Tom decides he's really going to run away and become a pirate. He meets his BFFs Joe and Huck and they agree to go together. About 3 miles away from town, there's an uninhabited land in the middle of the river called Jackson's Island. The boys think it'll be the perfect place to live. They steal some food, supplies, and a raft. When they arrive, they build a fire and start talking about all the grand things they're going to do as pirates, like burn ships, steal money, wear nice clothes, and, kill people? Nah, they're nice boys, so they won't kill any women. Joe and Tom also feel bad about stealing food, so they promise that their piracy will not involve stealing. Hate to break it to you kids, but you totally missed the point of piracy. But oh well. The next day, they play and eat and swim or laze about the island. And it is the perfect day. Until it's not. They begin to feel homesick. Later in the afternoon, they see a large group of boats along the river. At first, they think someone's drowned, until they realize that the boats are looking for them.
They felt like heroes in an instant. Here was a gorgeous triumph. They were missed. They were mourned. Hearts were breaking on their account. Tears were being shed. Accusing memories of unkindness to these poor lost lads were rising up, and unavailing regrets and remorse were being indulged. And best of all, the departed were the talk of the whole town and the envy of all the boys as far as this dazzling notoriety was concerned. This was fine. It was worthwhile to be a pirate after all.
After dinner, Joe suggests that they all go home because if people think they've died, then their families will be sad. Tom and Huck, of course, make fun of Joe until he gives up on the idea. But later, when Joe and Huck are asleep, Tom gets up and writes messages on 2 pieces of bark. He leaves one note on Joe's hat and puts the other in his pocket. He swims to the shore and stows away on a ferry to get home. When he arrives, he finds Aunt Polly, Sid, Mary, and Mrs. Harper talking about how much they miss the boys and how they should have been kinder to them. The funeral is on Sunday. When everyone goes to bed, Tom sneaks into his aunt's bedroom. He's about to leave the other note, but decides not to. When Tom returns to the island, the boys spend another day doing exactly what they want, but missing home even more. This time, when Joe suggests that they return, Huck agrees. But Tom has a better plan. He tells them his secret plan and they stay one more night. There are more shenanigans, but let's leave them to it and check in on the town. It's Sunday. Aunt Polly, Sid, and Mary are dressed in black. Becky is crying. They gather at the church for the funeral, and the minister paints a flattering portrait of the boys, making them seem sweet instead of the smooth, almost criminals they were. Well, are. Speaking of, Tom's super-duper secret plan is to hide and listen to their eulogy before revealing themselves. They interrupt the sob fest and their families immediately embrace them. Well, all except for Huck, who has no one to hug him. He stands there awkwardly twiddling his thumbs until Tom notices. He tells Aunt Polly that it's unfair that no one's happy to see Huck, so Aunt Polly goes to Huck and hugs him. And then, everybody bursts into song. No, seriously, I'm not kidding. The minister tells them to sing and praise God, so they do. Back at school, Tom and Joe are treated like kings. It's so cool that they fake their deaths, y'all. The fame goes to their heads and Tom stops paying attention to Becky, transferring his affections back to Amy Lawrence. Becky is jealous and plans her own schemes. First, she invites everyone except Tom and Amy to a picnic, but that does not work. Tom and Amy just ignore her. Her next idea works better. She sits with Alfred Temple during recess. If you don't know who that is, let me refresh your memory. Remember the boy in the beginning that Tom beats up? Yeah, that's him. Tom imagines beating him up again, but ditches Amy and heads home for lunch instead. Becky drops Alfred like a hot potato as soon as Tom is gone. Alfred gets mad and pours ink all over Tom's spelling book in revenge. Back at Tom's house, Aunt Polly's just heard from Joe Harper's mom that Tom did return home that one night. She's really disappointed with him and accuses him of never thinking of anyone but himself. Tom tells her about the note he was going to leave her. It's still in his jacket. Later, she finds the note and cries. We don't know what he wrote, but after she reads it, Aunt Polly says she'll forgive him anything now. Tom finds Becky and apologizes for being a jerk. Unlike Aunt Polly, Becky is in no mood to forgive him and goes, "Bye, boy." She walks into the classroom and notices that the teacher's desk is slightly open. Now, every day, their teacher takes a mysterious book out of his desk and reads it while the children are busy. Everyone wants to know what it is, and the desk is usually locked, so here's Becky's chance. She grabs the book and opens it. It's an anatomy book, which means nothing to her until she finds a picture of a naked man. A shadow falls on the page. It's Tom. She closes the book but accidentally tears it in the process. When class starts, Tom's messy spelling book is discovered. Becky's still mad, so she stays mum about Alfred. Tom thinks he messed it up himself, so he accepts the beating. Later, when the teacher discovers his torn book, he's really mad. He calls on the children one by one. When he gets to Becky, Tom sees her distress and saves her by saying that he did it. Tom takes another whipping, but when he sees the grateful look in Becky's eyes, he thinks it's all worth it. Summer finally arrives and yay! No school! But it's also time for Muff Potter's trial. Injun Joe takes the stand and gives his story. More witnesses testify that Potter was acting guilty the day the body was found. Curiously, Potter's lawyer doesn't question any of the witnesses. It's almost as if he has a secret weapon. By the end of the day, he reveals his secret weapon is one Thomas Sawyer. Tom swears to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Just when he gets to the part where he sees Joe stab the doctor, the man himself jumps up and escapes through a window.
Tom was a glittering hero once more. The pet of old, the envy of young. His name even went into immortal print, for the village paper magnified him. There were some that believed he would be president, yet, if he escaped hanging...
Tom's nights are filled with nightmares about Injun Joe who's nowhere to be found. But life moves on, and one day, Tom drags Huck along another misadventure, searching for buried treasure. There are 3 possible places they can find it: an abandoned island, a dead tree, or a haunted house. Since they didn't find any on Jackson Island, they go for the tree. What are they gonna do with this treasure? Huck decides he's going to spend it all on pie and soda. A boy after my own heart. Don't you love pie and soda? I love pie and soda. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. Tom says he's going to get married, and Huck's like, "Are you crazy?" Same, Huck, same. No luck with the dead tree, so on Saturday, they go up to the local haunted house. But 2 men interrupt their quest, and they recognize one of them. It's Injun Joe in disguise. Frightened, they hide upstairs. After a long while, Joe and his bro prepare to leave, but first, they plan to bury their own treasure, a bag of silver coins too heavy to take with them. While digging, Joe finds a chest filled with coins. Tom was right! You can find buried treasure in a haunted house. Wait, let me just look at Google Maps real quick. I'm kidding. I know we're in a pandemic. There are no haunted houses that I know of yet. Let's save that for when everything's, alright. Joe says he'll bring the gold to his other hideout, number 2 under the cross. After they go, Tom and Huck resolve to keep an eye on him and steal their treasure back. Tom thinks that number 2 refers to one of the rooms in one of the 2 local taverns. They ask around and find out that a lawyer is staying in one, and the other is more of a mystery. The room is always locked, and there's always someone there at night. They stake out the tavern over the next few days to see if Joe shows up. One day, Tom leaves Huck on the lookout while he goes inside. He discovers the room isn't locked after all, and in the process, almost steps on Joe, who's passed out on the floor surrounded by alcohol. He gets out real quick, but at least now they know where Joe's lair is. Becky's back, just in time for her picnic. Tom forgets all about Injun Joe and the treasure. He gets Becky to lie to her mother about where she's staying that night, and they spend the afternoon exploring the caves nearby, aka spelunking. Now, I don't know if you've ever spelunked before, but I can assure you it is the opposite of fun. Especially if it's a tiny cave and you're claustrophobic. But that's a story for another time. Anyway, getting back to this story, Huck is still outside the tavern. He hears a noise and sees two men carrying a box. He follows them and ends up outside the house of Widow Douglas. The men are fighting and Joe says something like, "I'm not gonna kill her, just, maim her a bit." Huck runs to a nearby house and bangs on the door. The residents, an old Welshman and his two sons, rush to help. They grab their guns and go to the widow's house. Huck follows, but when he hears gunshots, he runs away as fast as he can. The next day, Huck returns to the Welshman's house for an update. Apparently, the Welshman had accidentally sneezed, startling the criminals. The police are out searching for them now. At church, everyone's discussing the shootout, but after all the excitement dies down, they realize that someone, actually two someones, are missing. It's Tom and Becky. This is why you don't lie to your parents. Never lie to your parents about where you are. A search party is organized, but 3 days pass with no sign of them. Meanwhile, we switch over to Tom and Becky to find out what they've been up to. While exploring, Tom finds a little waterfall and a passage behind leading further down the cave. He takes Becky along and they marvel at their new discovery. Unfortunately, the cavern is filled with bats and they're not too happy to be disturbed. They swarm over Tom and Becky, chasing them further away from the entrance of the caves. Becky cries because she doesn't want to get lost and, hate to break it to ya, girl, they go around in circles and can't find their way back. But they're not totally helpless. They save their candles and eat bits of food Tom has stashed in his bottomless pockets. Eventually, they hear the searchers but can't get to them. Tom has yet another brilliant idea. He takes a kite line from his pocket, gives Becky one end while he holds the other. He goes off and soon sees a hand with a candle. He's ecstatic until he sees the person the hand is attached to. It's Injun Joe. He runs away in the opposite direction. Now, we shift back to the townspeople. It's the middle of the night on a Tuesday, and Becky and Tom have finally been found. He managed to discover a small passage that led outside the cave to the Mississippi River. He and Becky escape, hitch a ride on a boat, and go home. But they're very weak and spend the next few days recuperating. 2 weeks later, Tom learns from Becky's father that they sealed the cave to prevent any more children from getting lost. Tom is horrified. He tells the judge that he saw Joe in the caves.
When the cave door was unlocked, a sorrowful sight presented itself in the dim twilight of the place. Injun Joe lay stretched upon the ground, dead, with his face close to the crack of the door, as if his longing eyes had been fixed to the latest moment upon the light and the cheer of the free world outside. Injun Joe lay stretched upon the ground, dead, with his face close to the crack of the door, had been fixed to the latest moment upon the light and the cheer of the free world outside. Tom was touched, for he knew by his own experience how this wretch had suffered. His pity was moved, but nevertheless he felt an abounding sense of relief and security now, which revealed to him in a degree which he had not fully appreciated before, how vast a weight of dread had been lying upon him since the day he lifted his voice against this bloody-minded outcast.
Joe is buried near the cave. The author notes that the place he dies eventually becomes a tourist attraction because, of course it does. The day after the funeral, Tom tells Huck he thinks the gold is in the cave. They go there and keep talking about how grand it would be to be robbers and, guys, come on. Injun Joe was a robber. Do you really want to end up like him? Tom and Huck find the place Tom saw Joe and they see a cross burned into the wall. They search the area and find their treasure when they dig under a rock. They find guns too, but they leave them behind. In case robbers need them in the future, I guess. On the way back, they bump into the Welshman who invites them over to the Widow Douglas's house. Everyone in town is there for a party. The boys are told to go upstairs and wash and put on suits. Sid shows up and tells them there's this big secret that's supposed to be announced. Basically that it was Huck who really saved the widow, but Sid already told everyone. Oops. So, later at the big reveal, everyone acts fake surprised. The widow makes her own announcement. She plans to take care of Huck. Tom yells out that he don't need that no more cause Huck's already rich. Awkward. And everyone's like, you mean rich in the imagination? But nope, that's not what he means. Tom runs out and comes back with the gold. He pours it out for everyone to see. Told ya. People count the money and it's more than $12,000, which, going by the online inflation calculator, would be well above $300,000 today. Man, I really need to go find myself a haunted house. And so does everyone in town, apparently. They're all digging for treasure now. Judge Thatcher tells his future son-in-law he'll make a great lawyer someday. Ha! Huck is miserable, though. He hates being clean, and being told to eat with a fork, or having to go to church and school and read and talk properly. After 3 weeks, he runs away, and Tom eventually finds him in a deserted slaughterhouse. Huck tries to get Tom to run away with him and become robbers as they've always planned. But Tom's all respectable now, and he tries to talk Huck into staying because, hey, robbers can be rich too. Ah, the innocent wisdom of children. Huck agrees to stay for a little while as long as he can join Tom Sawyer's gang, and with that, the author says that the story must end because it's still a boy's story and not a man's. At least, Tom Sawyer's adventure ends. Huckleberry Finn's is just about to begin. But that's another story for another time. One of the book's most famous scenes is the part where Tom scams his friends into doing chores for him, so I thought it would be fun to talk about scammers. After all, it's not hard to stumble across one nowadays. Personally, I've been scammed a few times as well. The internet makes everything easy. All you need to do is open up your social media to find an abundance of Huns screaming, "Make money in your spare time!" to recruit unsuspecting people into their latest MLM or multi-level marketing schemes. Or, remember when you couldn't open your email without stumbling on a Nigerian prince asking for help? But those are just small time. What about the big ones? Well, there's Scotsman Gregor MacGregor who, in the early 1820s, invented a whole-ass country, made himself ruler of it, and got hundreds of people to invest and emigrate to it. Around 250 of his victims got dumped in the middle of nowhere, Central America. Most of them died. Even worse, this dude got acquitted for his crimes. Yikes. But let's fast forward to this century since that might be a little more interesting for you guys. In 2003, 19-year-old Elizabeth Holmes founded Theranos, what would eventually become a billion-dollar tech company based on an invention that could do hundreds of intricate blood tests with just a single drop of blood. Cool, right? Except the device didn't really work, and instead of coming clean, she just kept on lying and covering it up. Not so cool. The scam was exposed in 2015, and her trial for fraud is still ongoing, but there's already a book, a documentary, and soon to be a movie starring Jennifer Lawrence. And who can forget Fire Festival, the greatest party that never happened. Between 2016 and 2017, it scammed around 5,000 people into thinking that they were going to a very luxurious music festival in the Bahamas. Thanks mostly to a sleek social media campaign featuring none other than supermodels Bella Hadid and Kendall Jenner, what attendees got instead were sad sandwiches and an almost reenactment of The Lord of the Flies. Really, there's documentaries on Netflix and Hulu and all. The man in charge, Billy McFarland, was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. His co-founder, rapper Ja Rule, got cleared of all charges. Scamming seems to be a glamorous business. Yes, you get jail time, but you also get Hollywood movies and TV shows based on your life, written by Lena Dunham or Shonda Rhimes, starring the it girl or guy of the moment, then goes on to win Oscars or Emmys, forever immortalizing your name and your exploits. And that's the comforting thing about fiction sometimes. We can laugh about Tom Sawyer and all his scams because nobody really gets hurt. Also, at least Tom Sawyer learns to get less selfish and becomes more respectable. Unlike these real-life scammers, Tom Sawyer grew up. And there we go! That's a wrap! Thank you for listening, you guys. I hope I made the adventures of Tom Sawyer a little bit easier for you to digest. I'm Gabby, and you can find me at Gabby Pasquavox on social media, or you can use the hashtag DigestiblesPodcast. Special thanks to Thor for providing the narrations and Jazz for composing our theme music. And shout out to our listeners from Thailand and India. Tune in next week for our next episode. See ya! Digestibles is part of Connect, a podcast network, bringing together entertaining stories to spark your imagination. For more awesome content, follow us on social media @Connect Podcasts.